Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the government puts the brakes on new public spending as ministers warn tough decisions need to be made. They've scrapped universal winter fuel payments for pensioners. It will be replaced by a means-tested alternative.
I think it's quite wrong that we don't get it. It's got to affect us. I mean, we're not going to be in a workhouse, I mean, not yet anyway.
Also on tonight's programme, an inquiry hears a 91-year-old driver who killed a young boy in Edinburgh told police her foot slipped on the accelerator. People in Stirling struggling with noisy neighbours. The inmates of Scotland's biggest women's prison. Inspectors say the jail was built the wrong way round.
Coming up in the sport, after last night's defeat to Dynamo Kyiv, Rangers are left to count the cost of missing out on a huge Champions League windfall.
Hello, I'm Laura Miller. Welcome to Wednesday's programme. If you draw a pension, you'll be used to getting a winter fuel payment every year as a matter of course. Well, not anymore. The Scottish Government has confirmed it's to move to a means-tested benefit, following the UK Government's decision to do the same last month. It comes as Scotland's Finance Secretary put in place emergency controls on public spending, blaming expected cuts in the next Westminster budget, as well as tough decisions as a result of having to fund a series of public sector pay deals. Our political correspondent Andrew Kerr has the story.
Unwelcome news for many that the Scottish Government is having to put a brake on new spending. Sunny days here in Aberdeen, but bleaker times ahead perhaps, as Scottish ministers confirm they will also have to pass on the UK Government's cut to winter fuel payments. It will be targeted and not universal.
We only got to get it. It's handy. We're not loaded. You know what I'm saying? They're not rich. And so I think it's quite wrong that we don't get it.
I think maybe it should be means tested. I think so. Because there is a lot of sort of well-off pensioners.
At Napier University, the Finance Secretary confirmed the brakes are being put on new government spending to allow public sector pay deals to be reached. Shona Robertson has written to Cabinet Ministers, advising them she will keep a strict eye on spending.
Well, this is very significant, and of course as a direct result of the Chancellor's statement, you cannot announce £22 billion of public sector cuts and for that not to have consequences, and it will have consequences for Scotland, and we of course will set all of that out in due course.
The cut to the universal winter fuel payment is a UK Labour decision. Here the leader backs widening the targeting criteria than just those on pension credit.
This is typical of the SNP, find somebody else to blame. They have been in power for 17 years. Labour's been in government for a little over a month. The reality is they can't look anywhere else. They have presided over financial mismanagement over the last 17 years. They've also destroyed our public services.
It's quite clear that the chickens are now coming home to roost for the SNP, who've made the wrong decision on tax, on public service spending, on public sector pay, and on how to deliver growth for the Scottish economy.
Economists point out that going for growth is the way to get out of this, and of course politicians dream of that. But they also highlight that many of the issues that we are seeing are not unexpected.
To me, this isn't a huge surprise. It seems a little bit like it could have been predicted, because at the time of the budget in December, the government didn't set a kind of pay policy, and then the one they have published since probably looked like it was undershooting what was likely to be the pay deals in the end.
Tough choices ahead now. Questions remain about the viability of funding the 2026 Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, along with other projects. Details will be announced when Holyrood returns next month. Andrew Kerr, Reporting Scotland.
Well, our chief political correspondent Lindsay Bewes is at Holyrood Forest tonight. Lindsay, so we've heard about the winter fuel payment, but do we have any idea where this halt in public spending will be felt?
Shona Robeson would not be drawn on the details of where the axe will fall today. Instead, that detail will be set out here at Holyrood very shortly. She did confirm, however, there will be a freeze on non-essential recruitment. There will be spending limitations placed on government departments, and work is ongoing right now to look at which areas should now be deprioritised. What we do know, though, is that the level of the cutbacks are going to be very significant indeed. I was told that today by one government source, and they will be felt across the public sector.
And Lindsay, what do you think this all tells us about relations at the moment between the government in Holyrood and the government in Westminster?
Well, after the general election, after Labour won, there was much talk about resetting the relationship between the two governments. But the friction, the tension, I think, was always going to come when it came to public finances. The Scottish Government is, to quite a large extent, beholden to decisions taken by the UK Government. Shona Robeson pointing out today that she now faces uncertainty around her budget for this financial year because of the Chancellor's decision to conduct a financial audit. But economists as well have been criticising Scottish ministers for not preempting the challenges when it comes to paying for that public sector pay award. Both governments talking about facing very tough choices, both facing political decisions. It's just they may not always agree on them.
OK, Lindsay Bewes at Holyrood, thank you. Well, there was another indication of the state of Scotland's public finances today in the form of the annual Government Expenditure and Revenue Scotland, or GERS report. It found that the gap between the taxes raised in Scotland and the public spending for or on behalf of Scotland has increased. It's gone up by £3.6 billion to a deficit of £22.7 billion. And to explain all of this, as you can see, I'm joined by our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser. Douglas, in broad terms then, what does this report tell us?
Well, familiar tale, but with new numbers plugged in. All the tax raised in Scotland during last financial year, around about £88 billion. All the spending in Scotland, but also on behalf of Scotland, on armed forces elsewhere and on servicing government debt, around about £111 billion. The gap is what you're looking at there. Colossally big number, of course. To make a bit more sense of it, you use it as a share of total output from the economy. More than 10%, that figure, way ahead of the UK actual deficit and of what is seen as sustainable. And what's making this difference, an increase in the notional deficit this year, is oil and gas tax revenue in particular. Of course, prices soared the year before last. Profits and tax revenue soared with them. That boosted the tax revenue last year. It's down a bit this year. Still very substantial figures there. The long-term outlook for oil and gas, though, is that whatever happens to volatile global energy prices, the production and therefore the revenue from them is on a downward trend. So it's going to produce less help to narrow that gap between taxation and spending in Scotland.
And Douglas, every year there is intense political debate generated by this report. So what's been the political reaction today?
Well, this, to be honest, it only really matters if we're talking about the finances of a possible independent Scotland. And you get familiar arguments about this. There are other much bigger gaps in other parts of the UK. We're only talking about this because of Scotland's standalone finances being an issue here. On one side of the debate, these figures don't show what an independent Scotland could do with the levers available to it. Their opponents saying that the current arrangements deliver more than £2,400 higher spending per head in Scotland than you get in the UK as a whole. That reflects the distribution of funds to Scotland as well as Wales and Northern Ireland at a higher level per head than England. And it illustrates the scale of the initial challenge to an independent Scotland. But the heat's gone out of the independence debate a bit. I think the politics perhaps have moved on to the issue about raising the tax base to help narrow this gap. That's the politics where the Labour government's at. It's also where the new leadership of the SNP is at, in order to narrow a gap between taxation and the expectations of spending and improve public services.
Well, Douglas, we are grateful for you taking us through it all. Thank you. A court has been shown a recording of a police interview with a 91-year-old driver who knocked down and killed a 3-year-old in Edinburgh. Edith Duncan, who died in 2021, had originally been charged with causing the death of Xander Irvine by dangerous driving in June 2020. A fatal accident inquiry into the death has been taking place, as Joanne Macaulay reports.
Xander Irvine was with his mum on Morningside Road in Edinburgh on the 30th of June 2020 when a car hit them. He sustained multiple injuries and died later in hospital. The car was being driven by 91-year-old Edith Duncan.
At the fatal accident inquiry today, a police interview with Edith Duncan was played. It was recorded about a month after the crash. Under questioning, Edith Duncan said that she had taken her car to Morningside Road to do some shopping. On her way home, she tried to do a U-turn, but she said she then heard a bang and realised that she had mounted the pavement. She said her foot must have slipped on the accelerator.
When talking about the accident, Miss Duncan, who died in 2021, was softly spoken and calm, occasionally putting her hands to her head. She said at the time she didn't realise the accident was so serious. She said she was sorry and upset and couldn't believe that at her age something like this would happen.
The inquiry also heard from Professor Alistair Burns, who is an old-age psychiatrist. He has concluded that Edith Duncan most likely had Alzheimer's and had been showing symptoms since May 2019. Professor Burns said Edith appeared emotionally blunted after the accident, which is consistent with frontal lobe dementia. She'd also shown a lack of judgment, he said, when she parked illegally on the day of the crash. And she'd acted in a way that was inconsistent with her life when she cancelled her car insurance.
In the police interview, Edith Duncan was asked if she had seen 3-year-old Xander on the pavement. She said she hadn't. Xander's mother, who was watching the video alongside her husband at Edinburgh Sheriff Court today, started to cry at this point. Joanne Macaulay, reporting Scotland at Edinburgh Sheriff Court.
A design flaw at Scotland's new women's prison, HMP Stirling, has led to complaints from neighbours about noise and antisocial behaviour. The Inspector of Prisons says units housing the most challenging inmates are located within sight and sound of neighbouring houses. Katrina Renton has the story.
This is what Tony Macaulay and his family can hear from their home.
A lot of work went into the garden. We enjoy sitting in it and doing garden work, etc. Having barbecues, but we can't do that now because of the constant noise that comes from the prison, which goes on 24 hours a day, really, you know.
What sort of things are you hearing and how is it affecting your life?
Well, it goes from screams to shouts, to banging windows, swearing, threats to slashing. We've had it all, really, and it's a terrible environment to bring children up.
Stirling Prison is on the same site as the old Cornton Vale Women's Prison, so residents were used to having a prison as their neighbour.
We've lived here for 25 years and we never had one issue in 25 years here. And the prison originally was 300 yards away. It's now 30 metres from my back garden. And we have no issues with the prisoners. This has failed us for the planning situation.
In her report on Stirling Prison, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons for Scotland said the overarching impression was of an establishment with enormous potential heading in the right direction. But there is a major design flaw. The location of the separation and integration unit and high dependence units located in sight and sound of the neighbours.
For the prisoners, they're well aware that the community is right there. And therefore it's really important that the SPS considers ways to stop that happening. You know, I mean, in reality, you could have a barbecue the other side of the road and throw a hamburger over. It's that close.
This local councillor says around 20 households have raised concerns with him.
Now, sometimes the noise is so loud that children are in their bedrooms with headphones on, trying to reduce the sound, mitigate the sound coming into their bedrooms, and trying to sleep. For some of those young people here during the night, it's just impossible.
The Scottish Prison Service said the inspector's report highlights many areas of good practice, but recognised the neighbours' concerns.
We understand that there has been impact and as an organisation, SPS want to and are aiming to be good neighbours. We've taken short-term measures, some of which involve landscaping, and we have some long-term measures planned.
coverings have been put on the fences that back onto the neighbours' gardens, but Tony says if you go upstairs in his house, you can still see into the prison.
The impact it's having on people's mental health is unbelievable. And the stress of the whole situation.
Katrina Renton, reporting Scotland, Stirling.
The First Minister has defended one of his top ministers taking part in a face-to-face meeting with the Israeli Deputy Ambassador. It all came to light as a result of this tweet from the Israeli official. A number of SNP MSPs have criticised the encounter, with one telling BBC Scotland her heart sank when she saw a picture of the meeting. Well, our political correspondent David Wallace-Lockhart has been following this story. David, why has this meeting gone down so badly with some?
So Angus Robertson had that meeting with Daniela Grudsky last week, and she posted afterwards saying she was looking forward to cooperation in areas like culture and renewables with Scotland. Now, that went down very badly in some quarters of the SNP because there are those who are very critical of Israel's conduct in the Middle East, and they don't think these sort of meetings with Scottish Government ministers should be happening. Emma Roddick, she's a former Government Minister in Scotland, SNP MSP, told me her heart sank when she saw this posted online and she wasn't comfortable with the meeting taking place. Other SNP MSPs have gone public with their criticism, and in private some are really venting their anger, one telling me that they thought Angus Robertson was an absolute disgrace for taking that meeting and he should lose his job over it, though I should stress that's not going to happen here.
And the First Minister has come to Angus Robertson's defence.
Yeah, he's standing by his man here. He's saying he acknowledges that some people are uncomfortable with a face-to-face meeting, but he considered it an opportunity to convey the Scottish Government's position, as John Swinney put it, on the killing and suffering of innocent civilians in the region. Now, that may have been raised in private with the Israeli official, but in the statement the Scottish Government put out off the back of this meeting, they didn't outline any details on the suffering of civilians being raised. It may have been done in private. It did touch on a ceasefire from all sides and more humanitarian routes, but it wasn't as robust language as we've heard from some people in the SNP, such as Humza Yousaf, and I think that's an issue here that has left some very displeased about how this all played out.
OK, David, thank you. Some of the day's other stories now. And a 40-year-old woman has died following an incident in Glasgow. Emergency services were called to Wellington Lane yesterday afternoon to reports of a woman on the ground who'd been struck by a car. Police say she was dropped off in the lane prior to being struck. The driver of the car was uninjured. Officers are not treating the death as suspicious and are urging anyone with information to come forward. A police officer found guilty of sexually assaulting 4 women on the night he won a bravery award has lost his job and been sentenced to 150 hours of unpaid work. 36-year-old David Jones groped his victims while dancing to a band at the Scottish First Aid Awards in March last year at a hotel in Glasgow. He was also made to sign the Sex Offenders Register for 1 year. The Scottish Conservative MSP has apologised after calling his allies' leadership campaign awful. Stephen Kerr has publicly backed party veteran Murdo Fraser's bid, but raised doubts in WhatsApp posts he accidentally published as a status update. Mr Kerr said his comments had been taken out of context and reaffirmed his support for Mr Fraser. OK, let's get tonight's sport now with Lewis, and that controversy from last night rumbles on today, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly a big spillover from that, Laura, and so early in the season, but so many talking points already indeed. Thank you very much. Yes, hello there. Well, the Rangers manager, Philippe Clement, admits that last night's defeat to Dynamo Kyiv will have a big impact on his ability to bring better players to the club, with the Ibrox side missing out on tens of millions of pounds of Champions League cash.
Financially, it's a big difference for the club, that we know, and it will be different for the transfers to come in also, that we know. That's the reality. That's why I said also I don't expect this rebuild to be done in 4 weeks' time. But it's hard. It's hard for my team because it just happens.
Clement there underlining just how much of an impact missing out on the Champions League will have on his ability to invest in even more new players as part of his rebuild of the Rangers squad. Now let's take a look at some of the figures involved. Had Rangers won last night, they would have banked around €4 million for a playoff tie against Salzburg. And if they won that and made it into the Champions League, the estimated prize money is around €40 million. That's before revenue for ticket sales. It's not all doom and gloom though. Last night's loss will see the Ibrox club drop into the Europa League, where they'll still bank a minimum €12 million. But that figure is dwarfed by what they could have won had they made it to the continent's top club competition. And here is what some supporters make of it all.
I was actually preferring we'd go into Europe. I think we've got a better chance for your teams that's in there. Because the last time I was in Champions League, it wasn't so good. So I think that's the best place for us.
I didn't feel like it was a red card. He had his hands doing it at his side. There was no chance it was a red card. And that's kind of ruined the game for us, didn't it?
It's not been the best of starts. Not been the best couple of years, to be fair. But hopefully that Clement will get the backing that he needs to build the team up and go places.
Definitely need a couple of players, midfielders and strikers. I can't see Dessers holding it together for... He's not the best in the world, but he's not the worst, you know what I mean?
Yeah, team need time to gel together and stuff, so early days, that's what I'm saying. But I'm hopeful.
The thoughts of the fans there. And earlier on, I spoke to Chris Jack from website Rangers Review. He says while it's early in the campaign, there is already pressure on the horizon for the club.
You're always going to be emotional after a night like that. The Rangers fans were always going to be upset. They're always going to be emotional. They're always going to point many fingers in many different directions. But I think a number of their fears are well founded. And you look at the state of the squad. There's also the situation at Ibrox months before that to know how these things can potentially unfold.
Of course, it's not only Rangers testing themselves in Europe this week. St Mirren and Kilmarnock are too. They're both in Norway for Conference League qualifiers. St Mirren left it late to salvage a draw in the first leg of their Conference League third round qualifier against Brann last week. Having seen off Iceland's Valor earlier in the competition, Saints manager Stephen Robinson, speaking in Bergen in just the last hour, says that he wants an improved performance to boost the Buddies' chances of continuing their run to the playoff round.
The crowd are right behind them, it's right on top of you here as well. So you have to try and silence the crowd, try and slow the game down a little bit, like they done at our place. And then we've got to try and land on the ball and play. We didn't do that. We went too long and too straight. And we're better than that. We're better than what we showed. So that's the good bit. We know we can be better. We weren't at our best and we still managed to get a result. In terms of the size of the football club, their experience, their resources, they should be beating St Mirren on paper. But football's not played on paper.
Kilmarnock are up in the Arctic Circle to take on Tromsø. That tie is on a knife edge after an entertaining 2-2 draw in Ayrshire last week. But Killie are not in terrific form. Already dumped out of the Europa League by Cercle Bruges, they lost 4-0 to Celtic in their Premiership opener and went down again 3-0 at home to St Johnstone on Sunday. Kilmarnock and St Mirren's games both kick off at 6 o'clock tomorrow, and we'll show you the best of the first half action on this programme then. So yeah, Laura, we spoke about the financial implications, huge as well for St Mirren and Kilmarnock, so massive games for them. And just to mention as well, we will hear from the Kilmarnock camp later tonight, so we'll have the latest from that over on the 9 tonight.
Good stuff. After a long summer of sport, you guys are still being kept busy.
Not much of a break, is it?
Thanks, Lewis. Just before we go to the weather, a new development with an ancient monument. Analysis shows that the huge 6-ton altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge came from northeast Scotland rather than Wales, as previously thought. They're going to have more on this also on the 9 tonight on the BBC Scotland channel.
You're a proud Welshman and you've taken the Welsh status away from the stone. So how do you think it'll go down in Wales?
Yeah, I'm not sure they'll ever talk to me again. It's a loss for Wales, no doubt, but Wales has contributed so many rocks to this monument, I'm sure Scotland can have one.
They must have been very technically advanced to be able to do that, to bring it down by boat, bring it down on sledges or whatever.
And presumably it wasn't just a matter of engineering, there must have been some sort of social cohesion for the Scots and the Welsh and the English all to work together.
Absolutely, to bring this to here, there must have been linking between all of these areas.
Fascinating stuff, isn't it? And you can see more over on the 9 tonight on the BBC Scotland channel. OK, now Christopher is here with the weather. Another wonderful image there. Where's that? Where are we? Aberdeenshire.
Aberdeenshire, yes. A beautiful day of weather for pretty much everyone. Some sunshine and blue skies. Hope they made the most of it, because tomorrow, rain.
Oh, Christopher.
Sorry. Thank you very much indeed. Very good evening to you. Yeah, it was a lovely day of weather across much of the country today, wasn't it? Great picture there from the Royal Mile. Tourists enjoying 22 Celsius through the afternoon. But you can see on the satellite and radar picture thicker cloud towards the west coast and through the Hebrides. That's what's coming our way. You can see some outbreaks of rain there as well because an area of low pressure towards Iceland sending weather fronts our way. That means tonight, rain on the way. Let's take a look at how we get there. Initially, some evening sunshine and then the cloud builds, the rain arrives and the winds strengthen around the west coast near gale force for the Western Isles. And that rain continues to work further east and south overnight. It's a very mild night, 14, 15 Celsius in places, quite humid. And certainly first thing tomorrow, that rain still with us. So a very wet start for pretty much everyone. Some poor conditions on the roads with standing water and spray and some localised flooding as well. You'll see something a little bit brighter towards the far northwest, blustery with showers. And actually through the afternoon, those brighter conditions will chase that rain away, but it is a slow process. You can see by mid-afternoon, still cloudy, still some heavy downpours to contend with as well. A cooler day compared with today at mid-teen temperatures. Some sunshine developing across parts of the northwest to the northwest of the Great Glen, but blustery with showers, same too across the Northern Isles. And as we head through towards the latter stages of tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening, that earlier rain eventually clears, hopefully a bit of late brightness, and then largely dry overnight with some clear skies, so cooler than this coming night. There'll be a few showers around parts of the Highlands and Islands in towards Argyll and still a brisk southwesterly wind. It's a fine start to Friday. As we head through towards the afternoon, though, the cloud tending to bubble up and once again a few showers through parts of the west and northwest, 1 or 2 in towards the central lowlands. Temperatures in the warmest spots up to around 19 degrees. The weekend doesn't look too bad. Mostly dry, cloudiest across western parts, best of the sunshine and indeed the warmth across the east and the northeast, up to 19 degrees by mid-afternoon. That's the forecast for now.
We'll take that, Christopher. Thank you. Now, tonight's main news again. The Scottish Government has confirmed it's to replace the winter fuel payment here with a means-tested benefit, following the UK Government's decision to do the same last month. And the court has been shown a recording of a police interview with a 91-year-old who knocked down and killed a toddler in Edinburgh. A fatal accident inquiry into the death is taking place. And that is Reporting Scotland for now. Anne McAlpine will have your late news around 10:30 tonight. Until then, from everyone in the team, do enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.